Okay, where it says the Town of Lyons Board of Adjustments, it's time to call the meeting to order. It's June 18th, 2019. The Board of Adjustments meeting is beginning at 7:01 p.m. Dolores, could you do a roll call of members of the Board of Adjustments, please?
Yes, Chair Connie Eister.
Present.
Board Member Uker.
Present.
Board Members Joe Soma.
Present.
Board Member Bill Van Leeuwen.
Absent.
Yes.
And at this time, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we can swear in our new member, Steve Smith. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, at this time, we'll do some general business. Dolores, could you swear in our new board member, please?
Yes, Mr. Steve Smith, do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and of the State of Colorado and the ordinances of the Town of Lyons and faithfully perform the duties of the Board of Adjustments upon which you are about to enter?
I do.
Very good. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
At this time, I would ask the board to, for someone to make a motion to approve the minutes from August 28th, 2018. Is there someone who'd like to,
Sure. Motion to approve.
do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion approved, minutes approved. Okay. All right, the first application on the agenda is the variance application submitted by Mr. Steve McCain for a side yard setback variance for the property located at 231 Park Street. This item is scheduled for a public hearing before the board. The purpose of the board adjustments is to consider variance requests and appeals of administrative decisions. In considering an application before it, the board must hold a public hearing and will follow certain procedures in order to conduct a hearing that is fair, impartial, and orderly. As a general rule, each speaker will be given 5 minutes to speak, and the applicant's primary representative will have up to 10 minutes to present the application. Subsequent speakers representing the applicant may speak for up to 5 minutes per speaker. The board may ask questions of the applicant, staff, or any speaker at any time. If there are members of the public present to comment on the application, the board will generally allow each speaker up to 5 minutes to address the board. The board discourages repetitive testimony. The concurring vote of 4 members of the board is necessary to reverse or modify any decision or determination of the town to approve a variance application. I will now open the public hearing on the variance request for 231 Park Street. We'll hear first from Paul Glasgow, Town Planner, who will give an overview of the case.
Thank you. What you have before you is a variance application for 231 Park Street. The home is a modular home that was, I believe the construction started in 2017, and the home was placed on a foundation. The west side of the home was located at the 5-foot setback. The applicant, during the development process, applied for and received a floodplain permit and a variance for the home so that it could encroach upon the front yard setback. That variance application did not include steps on the west side of the property. Steps or a deck on the west side of the property. It did include a door. That was on the modular home design itself, but not on the site plan. And so when it was initially evaluated and the first variance was granted, it wasn't taken into consideration. The first variance was granted in, I think it was April of 2017. And it approved a front yard setback to allow a lesser setback than 25 feet so that the home matched the rest of the neighborhood. Most of the homes on that street are within that front yard setback of 25 feet. I think it was in January of this year, the town was inspecting the property and noticed that the steps were constructed in the setback. So we issued a notice of violation, for Mr. McCain, and he came in to work with us. So we offered this as an alternative to having him take down the steps to submit a variance application. We weren't sure that it would qualify, but we said we would evaluate it. The home was also being lived in prior to a certificate of occupancy. So we still have not issued that because the building permit has not been finalized as of yet, because the steps were outstanding. We were going through and trying to final out the application and discovered those were not on the plan and they were built in the setback. The applicant is seeking approval of the variance to keep a deck on the west side of the building, which includes it's a little confusing because the applicant is requesting a 0 side yard setback, but in the site plan it shows a 2-foot side yard setback would be required to allow for the deck and stairs. I think the minimum variance required would be a 2-foot setback based on the evidence provided. The applicant stated in the application that the stairs and deck are required by the fire department, and the fire department did issue a letter that said they would like an exit to remain there. And in subsequent discussions with the fire department, they have indicated that an egress is necessary, but the stairs and deck are not. So something like a Juliet balcony could be considered there, where you have an egress, but it's not it's not a full-time exit, if you will. If you have an exit without a deck and stairs, it is considered not safe. So you would have to block off some of it and provide an egress in some form. The Lyons Fire District has reached out to their attorney to see if they have any liability from closing off that egress. They did not hear back at this time, so they did ask that before we would remove the deck and stairs, if that is an option, is the course, and block off the exit, that they identify whether that is the case, so that we retain at least an egress there until we get approval from fire that they could remove the entire egress. So in the variance criteria for approval, as staff went through and evaluated the code, there were a number of issues that the variance did and did not achieve. And I'll go through those. First, the land use is allowed in the zoning district. This is a single-family home, and it is in the R1 zone district. A modular home is allowed there, so that is an affirmative criteria. The second is the variance does not put any building in the public right-of-way. The variance does not affect the public right-of-way. C, the variance will not alter any definition of the Chapter 16, which is the zoning code, and it will not. This is 161470D. The variance is the minimum variance that would afford relief with the least modification possible to the requirements of the Lyons zoning regulation. In this case, the variance would be, requested is 0. It seems from the site plan, it would be 2 feet. So if we were going to recommend a variance, it may be that the applicant has more information on that, but it seems that the 2 feet from the site plan submitted would be the minimum. So if we adjusted it to 2 feet, that would be an affirmative for D. E, the variance is based on the physical condition or circumstances unique or particular to the property. In this case, there are there is a floodplain on the property. The property is generally flat, so this would not prevent the creation of a code that could be uniquely enforced on these type of properties. So we couldn't create a code that would say in this property versus the next property, we should have a different type of zoning district. So it achieves that. There's no way to particularly zone for the variance that is requested, in other words. And with F, the variance is not based exclusively on findings of personal hardship or financial hardship. In this case, I believe this is affirmative in that there was no intent to deceive. So when those stairs were built, it was assumed that they were in, assumed that they would be there. So it's not based on the fact that it was just personal hardship or financial hardship. However, in the criteria to grant a variance, where 1 through 8 are required in the 16, I think it's code 161470 B, there were a number of criteria that I found to be negative, that the staff found to be negative as we reviewed the criteria to approve a zoning variance. First, that there are unique physical circumstances or considerations such as irregularity, narrowness, or shallowness of a lot, or exceptional topographical or other physical conditions particular to the affected property. While there is a floodplain on the lot, we have a floodplain permit, and you can build in a 100-year floodplain. So where in the last variance they declared that as a condition for moving the building towards the front yard setback, moving it from side to side wouldn't have mattered. In number 2, the condition that is because of these unique physical circumstances or conditions, the property cannot be reasonably developed or used in compliance with the provisions of this chapter. The lot is a buildable lot. The side yard setback didn't need to be affected in order to create a buildable lot. Again, I think in the last variance they found that the floodplain in the rear was sufficient uniqueness to move it to the front, but from side to side it didn't seem to be an impact. Number 3 indicates that due to such physical circumstances or conditions, the strict application of this chapter would create a demonstrable hardship. And I found this to be negative as well, because when we spoke to the building official, removing one egress still allows this home to be habitable. And you could construct a home here without impeding on the side yard setback. So it was that was a negative. That the demonstrable hardship is not self-imposed. Here, again, because the home was placed in the setback, the deck and stairs were constructed without it being issued a building permit for it or a floodplain permit for those on that side. The would have been required, and the rest of the construction went through that. We would have identified that when those were included in that building permit or a setback or the floodplain permit. So in this case, because they were left out, it seems to be somewhat self-imposed. And then number 5, that the variance, if granted, will not affect the proposed development or use of the adjacent property or neighbor. And in this case, because it's a 0 side yard setback, it would impede on the property. However, we did receive notice from the neighbor that said the owner of the adjacent property at 217 Park, indicating they had no conflict with this variance. That is the owner. If that owner changes, that's the question. Will it impact the property? They are looking at, I think they have already constructed a fence to make it less visible along the property line, which is allowed in the setback, so that it was not, so they're attempting to lessen that impact. The variance for 6, 7, so that's 1 through 5, I found those to be difficult to find as an affirmative. 6, 7, and 8, I found affirmative, that the variance, if granted, will not change the character of the zoning district in which the property is located. 7, the variance, if granted, is in keeping with the intent of this code. It is not always that an intrusion into the setback will violate the intent of the code. It is good to have that setback, but the variance, if granted, will not adversely affect health, safety, for number 8, or welfare of the citizens in town. Although, the setback allows fire to go around the house, fire, when they looked at it, did not seem to find this to be an issue. So, those are the reasons that it was difficult to approve this variance from the staff point of view. And so, we look towards your deliberation to understand if we made, the right recommendation. Mr. McCain is here in the audience, and he may have some more information that would be beneficial. With that, I'll conclude my staff report.
Thanks, Paul.
Sure.
Does any of the members of the Board of Adjustments have any questions for Paul?
Just one. This is Commissioner Greg Booker. You said something about fire has not ruled whether, what was that? I mean, there was some, is it a liability issue or what?
Yeah. So when I spoke to JJ Hoffman, the fire chief, he has indicated that he would like to hear back from his attorney whether they have liability if an egress is removed from that side. Mm-hmm. We had discussed the matter of removing the deck and stairs with the building official, and for a door that opens, you can't have a door that opens that it has no deck or stairs. You can have a Juliet, which is kind of a door that kind of opens, but there's a fence right at the edge. So he was reticent to recommend or say that he would, before removal of the door in total, meaning boarding up of that, because the modular was designed with that as an exit. So if he agreed that if we retained some type of egress there, that might be, at this point, what would be acceptable to him. But if we recommend removing the whole egress, he would like to, I would recommend that if we were going to recommend that, or that we get approval from fire before that occurs.
I have one question for you, Commissioner Joe Soma. For the criteria for granting the variance for number 4, that the demonstrable hardship is not self-imposed, did you look to see if that unit were centered in the property, would that still be a setback, or would that deck still be in the setback?
If it was centered, no, it would not be in the setback. There is a driveway on the, let me pull this. There's a driveway on the eastern side that allows the applicant to get to the rear of the property. So it would reduce the size of that driveway, but it would not. You could place the modular a little bit more eastern and avoid the setback.
Paul, do you know if it's been considered whether the door could be put on the east side of the building instead of the west side in order to preserve a second egress, but allow for the stairs to be put
Sure.
within the setback?
There are 3 egresses on the modular. There's one on the east side, there's one on the north side, and there's one on the west side. So
So there's already a door at the front and a door on the east side. I see like on the map. There's a little arrow, black arrow. Is that the one on the east side?
let me see here.
Your stairs, at least. That's
Looks like it.
There's-
So anyway, the door on the west side with the deck, that's a 4th egress? Is that what?
It's a 3rd egress.
A third.
So there's one on the north, there's one on the east, and there's one on the west.
Gotcha. Okay.
I might be able to.
I see.
Actually, oh, you still looking?
Yeah, I can
It's okay.
show you on the overhead if you would like.
That's okay.
Okay.
I think I get it.
Could you clarify a little bit about, you were saying a 2-foot setback versus a 0-foot setback? Like the site plan is showing 2 feet, but
So on the site plan, what was recorded, I think it's on page 3 of the application. The site plan shows on the east side of the site, the west side of the site, it indicates a 2-foot proposed side yard setback variance. In the paper application, a 0-foot setback was requested. So it seems from this documentation that a 2-foot setback would be the minimum required. And, yeah.
Sounds like the 2 foot would be the maximum and the minimum would be 0 if that's
Sorry,
what's in there.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
The minimum intrusion into the setback. Yes.
Any other questions for Paul? We can always ask questions later if we need to. Okay. Okay, at this time, I'd like to ask the applicant to present his or her application. Steve, do you want to come up and say a few words? You just wherever you're comfortable.
You can sit. You want to sit?
Well, my original application was I was building a garage in the back, and that's why I hugged that side where I'm having the problem, because I want to build basically a little ADU garage back there, something like the neighbor has, and that's why I was hugging that side so tight. I didn't know there was going to be a problem. And you got to have room to get a dump truck back there, tractors, everything, and if I didn't really see a problem with building the deck, I mean, I can squeeze it in. This is my second go around on this, and I really don't really understand it. I mean, they're built, I mean, you're gonna tie it into the fence, we're making the property look good, the neighbors don't care. That's kind of why I hugged that side. When you were saying put it in the center, yeah, you could have centered it, but then you could never get to the backyard, maybe with a lawnmower. So that's why I squeezed it over to that side, and I thought I was close enough, but on our set of plans that me and Paul looked at, they didn't put a little squiggly line, I don't even know what it's called. They didn't put it on there, and they said there was no door and there was no landing, but on the original plans for the building, there's a door. So in common sense to me, if there's a door, there's a landing. I mean, I didn't realize this was going to cause this much of a problem. I mean, if I have to, I got to cut 3 feet off the deck, and it just makes everything look terrible. And it's not really causing a hardship. And as for their idea to take the door out, which that building was designed to have that door there, you can't take that door out. Because then if you got to, say you got a fire in the back room, how are you going to get out? Because the 2 egresses are in the front. Without that door, you burn up. And I really wouldn't want to have that on my conscience, So that's why I'm trying to get my variance, so if I do sell it, or, so the next person has it, and, Dan and Kathy are all good with it, I mean, it's a wood deck, it's not like it's going to be there forever. I mean, they burn out, rot out and go, but that's basically why I hugged that one side. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to build down there anyway with all the rules and all the flood stuff, but hopefully you guys see my point and you go, oh, it's just a deck, it gives you room to put a chair and a table on. Otherwise it's like, well, how in the, you put a Juliet deck on there so you sit on there and burn. So I mean, it's common sense, just put a deck on and you're there. It's already built. It's really up to you guys.
Does the board have any questions for Steve? You can take a minute. Steve, could you just put in stairs? Does it have to be a deck?
It's not really even a deck. It's just, the stairs are built into the deck. You walk over, they're 6 foot long stairs, and you just go right over. Otherwise, you got like a dead space. What do you do with it? I'm going to tie it into the fence. It'll look really good.
So I have a question, a couple of them actually. On the site plan, it says 2-foot variance, and that in the application, it says 0. Is there a discrepancy between the two, or?
I don't even know. I mean, I gotta ask Paul, I have no idea.
Well, is the deck built to the 0? It's built.
It's already on the 0 lot line, ready to
Okay.
be
Okay.
tied into the fence. And if I get 2 foot, that means I cut 2 foot, and then I got a 2-foot walkway between the fence and the stairs. And what do you do with that? Collect leaves, and it just kind of makes a mess.
So the site plan is, the drawing that we have isn't really accurate then?
Not sure what you have.
You want to see a copy?
Copy of it?
Sorry, this is my
It
notes.
says 2 foot.
It was what Scott.
Oh, it's what?
Scott Cox.
Okay, oh. Yeah, that's pretty much is there. But I don't know what because where I built the fence, I basically gave Dan and Kathy 2 foot on their side.
Oh.
So I'm not going, because there's a giant, what do I want to call it, a concrete wall that was put in by the masons there, and I didn't tear it out because then Dan and Kathy'd have to redo their asphalt, and so I just basically just gave it to them. I'm building my fence 2 foot in. So I'm at actually a 0 lot line minus the 2, if that makes any sense. There's 2 foot, but I'm really I call it 0 because I'm inside that concrete barrier. But my property line's on the other side, and it's like, I wouldn't do that to my neighbors. I don't want to have to tear out all that concrete and, so I'm basically building my fence and giving them an extra 2 foot on their side, and if it's there for 18 years, it's theirs. I could care less.
So this is accurate then, and the property line is really 2 feet on the other side then? It's not
Okay,
0 that
yeah.
you're looking for?
This would suggest it's actually 3 feet on the other side that
Okay.
you gave them.
Yeah, I mean, it's, because I've already got the post in, because, I mean, for me to go into there, I would have been really tearing up their yard.
Understood.
I mean, when you go off the property pins, it's swings way out in their yard, and I'm like, well, and it's really the old property line that they made back in the olden days. It's an old existing fence, but the new property line gives me part of their yard. And I don't want to be in their yard. I want to be in to where it makes more sense to work. And me and Dan and Kathy all get along good, and I'm not worried about if they got a couple feet. It doesn't matter to me.
So it's really the application that's off, not the site?
I guess that's a good way to put it. I'm kind of, where it is maybe the 2 foot, is that what you're calling it?
Well,
Well, it's a 3-foot
Or
variance.
3
but
foot?
yeah.
I'm kind of already gave that away, because basically I could take my deck and cut 2 foot off of it and still have somewhat of a landing there, like on the other side. But man, they're hard to get in and out of. Can't bring a dishwasher up at a laundry, anything.
yeah, there's code that requires, I think, 36 inches.
Yeah, it's 36, but you start bringing in a stove on 36, that's 35 and a half, it gets pretty tight.
Steve, can I have my map?
Oh.
The site plan?
I couldn't even see it.
That's all right. So right now, this deck is, did you say it's 6 feet wide?
It's whatever that print says, because I don't have my glasses tonight, so I can't read it.
If you
We're
do the math,
8.
It says 8.
8.
Because,
Basically it's 8.
Okay.
God, I even forgot his name. The guy, Scott Cox and Associates, measured it all.
Okay, great. Any other questions for the applicant?
So you made a note that in the back, the egress, and again, this is more fire code thing that they have to deal with. It's not something that we can really assess, but it's just kind of trying to look forward to what they're going to come back with. So the back door, the door that we're talking about, of course, we can't see what the interior plan is. There's a hallway or something, and you can't really get to those front doors if
Well,
there were.
Bedroom number 1's on fire, you're stuck in the back.
Okay.
Bedroom 2 and the masters, you're stuck in the back. If I would have built the house, I would have put a sliding glass door on the back, which, would really be nice.
Okay.
But, it's not there, so.
It's, again, I'm trying to look forward to what they're going
Yeah.
to come back with rather than, it's nothing that.
That door's got to be there to get out of the house, otherwise you're stuck. Because the other ones enter on the back side, the living room, and the front's the front living room. So that's your exit to get out of the bedrooms.
I think we have a copy of the internal plan.
Okay. Because that's actually like the laundry room where you exit out of.
Any other questions for the applicant at this time? Thanks for your saying your piece.
Okay.
Okay. At this time, I'll open for public comment. There doesn't appear to be anyone in the audience to comment. So, let's see. Since we never opened public comment, I'm going to close public comment. All right, at this point, I'm going to close the public comment portion of the public hearing in order for the board to deliberate. Please keep in mind that during deliberations, no further input from staff, the public, or the applicant is permitted unless the board requests clarification on specific issues. At this time, I'd open the floor for discussion. Well, I suppose first someone ought to make a motion if they feel like they're able to do so one way or the other. And then we could, if there's a second, then we can discuss that motion. Does anyone feel like they want to make a motion for one or the other at this time?
So I'll make the motion that we grant the variance.
Is there a second for that?
I'll second it.
Okay, so now we can open discussion. Why doesn't everybody just put their, is this,
That's, it'll work. I think
just put all the
about
greens on?
Yeah.
Okay. That we don't have to worry about it. Okay, well, if, we can start anywhere, general comments, or we can kind of walk through the various factors we have to look at and see how we can get to a decision that way. Do you want to?
Yeah, I can, since I made the motion, I could start. With a fence along this line, it didn't make a lot of sense to me to, in a way, the fence defines the property line. So having a little space inside of the fence that has essentially no, there's no visual impact to the neighborhood, the neighbors can't see it, that it just strikes me that the fence essentially defines, the incursion into the setback anyway, so that just filling the space out to the fence, it makes as much sense or more sense to me than, let's say cutting that deck back to 5 feet. So there's a fence, then there's 5 feet, then there's a 5-foot deck, 5 feet, 11-inch deck. I think that would have no impact whatsoever on the neighbors seeing or any neighborhood impact. There's no, I don't see how that would benefit to force, or to have that deck. Essentially, it looks like it would be cut off by, sorry, let me back up a little bit. It wouldn't be 5 feet because the fence is already 2 feet into the setback. So we're talking a 2 or 3 foot little walkway that I think would be really awkward, actually seems to make more sense to have the deck go right up to the fence. Because to me, then with an ADU in the back, you do want a fatter space in case fire trucks need to get into the ADU, or something needs to happen back in the ADU. So that piece makes sense to have that wider and then fill in aesthetically over on the west side. That was my reasoning for granting.
Is it still accurate to say that a 2-foot setback would be appropriate, given that that's the property line? And if something were to change with the fence or whatever, that would still be maintained in the future?
In other words, it would revert back to the 5-foot setback and something would have to be done with the deck, is that what you're?
No, I'm just saying, if you approved it with the 2-foot setback,
Because it's already there.
because it's already there, that seems like it's 6 one way, half dozen the other. Unless something does happen with the fence, in which case you're sort of renegotiating that anyway. It's wooden. You might want to do something else later, but maybe preserving that 2 feet makes sense somewhere down the line.
That makes a lot of sense.
Well, I'll jump in. What is troubling to me is this part of 1470B that is just has words like shall not in it, or shall find. And if we kind of walk through the factors, unique physical circumstances or conditions that are particular to the affected property. In other words, we're not just dealing with, and I have the statute here if you want to look at it, Joe.
Is that the,
Yeah. In order to grant the variance, the Board of Adjustments has to find all of the following have been satisfied. There are unique physical circumstances or conditions such as irregularity, narrowness, or shallowness of the lot, exceptional topographical or other physical condition particular to the affected property. I'd be interested in hearing what other members of the board have to say. I do think, given what Joe was describing, that we want to keep a driveway large enough to allow large trucks or larger vehicles to access the back of the property, creates, a narrow lot. I suppose we could meet that factor. Because of the unique physical circumstances or conditions, the property cannot be reasonably developed or used in compliance with this chapter. So again, that's maybe some of the same facts we're looking at. Due to the unique physical circumstances or conditions, the strict application of this chapter would create a demonstrated hardship. That's the part that I'm struggling a little bit with, because it's not clear to me from the testimony we heard that the fire department is requiring this third egress. It seemed like at first they were, and we heard testimony from the applicant that is essential because of the way the layout of the interior is to have a fire exit on that side and in the back. But we don't have that from the fire department to confirm it yet, and it sounded like we got sort of conflicting testimony from this town that maybe it wasn't absolutely required. So we might have to come back to that factor. That the demonstrable hardship is not self-imposed is the next factor. Again, maybe the building could have been shifted to the east more when it was built, but that would have created this smaller driveway limiting access to the back.
Or the steps could have been made smaller.
Steps could have been made smaller. The variance if granted would not adversely affect the proposed development or use of the adjacent property and neighborhood. I think Joe spoke to that in his comments. I do think that, as Joe said, it shouldn't hurt the neighbors, and the neighbors are not complaining. If the variance if granted won't change the character of the zoning district, that seems true. It's in keeping with the intent of the code. And the variance if granted will not adversely affect the health, safety, or welfare of the citizens of the town. So that's kind of where I'm stuck a little bit, is on that demonstrable hardship factor. but I'd be willing to be persuaded. And, yeah, any thoughts on that from?
Yeah, and, well, toward that, that's why I had asked about centering it, because it looks like, really, it's only a couple foot difference.
Yeah.
And so for number 3, in the criterion, my consideration on it is that if the applicant is built it with kind of the 2 units in mind, and then that makes a difference to me. If that variance of just a couple feet allows for a more usable and functional space on that other side, that seems to make a difference on this for me. That would add a little bit of a hardship. It's like, oh, right, now it's really limited to what could be done in the back. It's really limiting the back of the space.
Accessibility to the rest of the building. Okay.
Paul, a question for you, if I can remember what it was. Give me a minute. Oh, golly, what was it I was thinking of? Now it's lost. Purpose of setbacks in the code generally?
Fire separation, fire access, is one of the reasons, oftentimes drainage, so that you're not draining onto neighbor's property. So there's separation between those so that fire doesn't leak from one to the other is often the case. This deck is not adjacent to another structure, but also fire can, utilize that setback to get around the house. Those are some of the reasons. In our code, it defines it just as, each type of zoning itself has a different type of setback, and that defines the character of the neighborhood. And thereby, it creates a expected design as well, and so a uniform design. That doesn't necessarily, that's why people come in to get variances, so they don't have to be necessarily uniform. So those are the reasons that come to mind.
I've got one little thing to persuade you a little bit.
Hang on a minute,
is-
Steve.
oh,
Let me ask you, and then you can talk. Steve, I wonder if you have something to comment on that would help us in our
Maybe
deliberations.
to help you persuade, since Joe's kind of talking about to get back to the ADU, Lions need somewhere for people to live, so, we're looking at that way, and the hardship is, I don't have access from the alley. Like the other houses, like my neighbor Dave, he's got access from the alley. It stops in the alley at Dave's house.
This is the alley to the south.
That goes all the way down. And I don't have access. That's why I tucked that a little bit tighter so I can get in. And as for like you said, you move it a foot and you run a dump truck back there and a big, cement mixer. Man, a foot makes a lot of difference. I got pretty good neighbors. They let you encroach on them, but it's not something I really want to do. But that's why I really tucked it over, because I don't have any, was my hardship. Otherwise, I would have just come down the back of the alley.
Thank you, Steve.
You bet.
Paul, anything else you wanted to add on that?
I can add to what Steve said. The town alley used to actually extend along these lots. At one point, there was a request for the town to get rid of those. And I don't know where that request came from, but these lots were designed for rear access. and they don't have that anymore.
Well, I have a proposal, maybe a friendly amendment to your motion. I would feel more that there's a demonstrated hardship and allowing the variance if we required that the house could not be built any more into the setback, built any more into the east. I mean, I'm concerned that if the reason we're giving this special treatment to the west side of the house is in order to preserve the width of the driveway on the east to allow for fire and other access, that we would maybe make as a condition to the variance that there would be something to preserve the space to the east. But I don't know if we can do anything other than address what goes into the setback on the east.
You can impose conditions, is my understanding. So you can impose conditions on the property to, when you approve variance.
I had a question. Is there any sort of requirements for fire safety? This is a very narrow lot. It's a pretty long house. Is there a requirement that the fire department be able to get a fire truck back to the back? And if so,
No.
is there a width requirement?
No, typically the fire department doesn't have to get to the rear of the house. They have to get their hose to the rear, and they have 200-foot hoses or something. So the distribution of hydrants is supposed to be such in the older parts of town, and it not always is, that they can reach all sides of the building that way from a adjacent hydrant.
Okay. I found myself wondering with your comment about the alley, if that alley was relied upon for appropriate access and that was eliminated at some point.
Yeah, I can't comment on
Okay.
why the alley was divested of or the right-of-way was gotten rid of, but it was at one point in time.
Okay.
Well, we can also limit the variance just for this particular structure. In other words, it wouldn't be a variance to go into the
Into
setback.
perpetuity for anything else you wanted to put
Right.
in there. Right. That's,
I mean, it could be a deck that replaces the existing deck, but
Right.
you
So
couldn't,
a use condition.
yeah.
I do think it is arguable that for purposes of access into the back of the house, for bringing in appliances or whatever else you have to, you can make the case that it does impose a hardship to live within to comply with the
Setback.
setback for that access. I mean, you can make that argument.
Yeah, and the letter we have from Fire Chief is, at least this one is compelling enough.
Yeah, we've heard some contrary testimony after the letter was
About the
sent.
certificate of occupancy, yeah.
Yeah, but yes, we do have some evidence of the fire need.
Were we ever able, Paul, were we ever able to locate the floor plan?
I don't believe I was. Let me, site plan exhibit,
We don't have to, it's just.
I know I can. It should be in the building permit in the floodplain. Here. Give me a second, I will find it.
Okay, thanks.
And toward that, I'm making the assumption that whoever constructed the house had a purpose to those doors. So I'm going on the assumption that, to get rid of one just isn't really a viable.
Then creates its own hazard.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a condition that was created by the setback situation, but by the choice of
Homes, and that's.
Size, right.
Right, and that's a far bigger scope than.
Yeah.
Homes come as they hunt, they do.
Well, when you build them from scratch, you have an opportunity to.
Well, that's, yeah, and that's
Yeah.
the hard, for number 4 was the hardest for me.
The self-imposed nature.
Yeah, and I think the piece that really made a difference for me was when, Paul suggesting that, it was, unfortunate or, it was just not a.
It wasn't considered at the time in a
Yeah.
timely fashion.
Yeah, and that it was and innocent enough, like, oh, that totally makes sense. And as the
Certainly,
homeowner said, it's like,
yeah.
there's a door, go in that comes with a deck or a landing like
Sure.
that just follows. So that was my deliberation on number 4 was the hard one for me.
I am not finding it.
It doesn't hinge. It's okay. Just a little bit. Nice too. Thank you.
Well, what we could, I think all the members of the board have a sample resolution that was part of our materials. You can look
didn't
at.
print those.
It's okay. This is the one that was a sample variance approving the variance. And the relevant clause is 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5th whereas clause. Whereas the applicant has applied for a variance to reduce the side setback of the subject property to 0 feet. Actually, I put all this language in the wrong place. But if we go to section 1, where the Board of Adjustments here approves a variance, the side yard setback of the subject property as follows. We could say the applicable side yard setback shall be reduced from 5 feet to 2 feet.
Right.
And then maybe we could add something like, for the purpose of a deck or stairs to secure egress on the west side of the house of a size not to exceed, and then we could put in the dimensions of the existing deck.
Yep.
So that it doesn't become just a generic right to invade that setback for any purpose.
You could refer to the site plan.
Okay.
As well, as part of the application.
You could just say up to the setback.
Right, but, I mean, like if they
Yeah.
decide to build a wraparound porch or something, I'm trying to think that we want to limit it
Oh,
to.
to the north-south
Yeah,
length of it.
yeah, yeah. Not to exceed the dimensions shown in the site plan attached as exhibit something, or is it already attached as exhibit?
As part of the flood plan application.
Well, but this can become a matter of public record, right?
Oh, right.
On
You
the-
can attach
we
the
could-
site plan to the.
Resolution.
To the resolution, because I'll have to record it.
Yeah,
anyway.
so let's say attached as exhibit A or something
Okay.
like that. Okay. Would you accept that as a friendly amendment, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have a second on that?
A second.
Okay. Is any more deliberation, or does the board feel like there are any more discussion?
Nothing further.
Do you feel comfortable what you had said on the east side?
Well, I'm questioning whether we have the authority to impose
Right.
such a broad condition.
Mhm.
And I thought, well, maybe this is a smaller condition, that is one that feels more comfortable to us, since we were really, but
Just
I will say this is a matter of public record, this hearing, and should we get a request for a variance on the east side, it's something that we could look back at our minutes from today to address. Any other discussion? Okay. All right. Where's my cheat sheet? Okay. Okay, so staff, if you could please take a roll call of the vote on the motion to approve Resolution 2019-01 as amended.
The only friendly amendment that's sticking, we took the friendly amendment off that would require that they could not be built anymore onto the east side.
That's right.
That was stricken. The friendly amendment is not to exceed dimensions shown on the site plan as attached in Exhibit A.
Yes, and if you'd like, I can provide you some language either now or afterwards.
Afterwards, we
Okay.
can just attach it. Perfect. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 And that was unanimous.
The 2031 Park Street variance request submitted by Mr. Steve McCain is approved by a vote of 4 in favor and 0 against. The public hearing is closed at 8:02 PM. Staff, is there any other regular business items to address?
No.
Okay.
What about the minutes?
We did that at the beginning.
Oh, we did, okay.
Yeah, I think we did.
We did, yeah, we did.
Any reports of board members or staff? I just personally would like to thank Steve for accepting his appointment. We appreciate you coming on. I do believe that the town has recently changed changed the code to
Right.
allow 7 members of this board. And I don't know what's going on with that, but we could maybe have 2 more folks added at some point. All right, we'll adjourn the meeting, and it is at 8:04. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Don.
Thanks, Steve.